So in 1789, with the signing and the completion of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, you had a security instrument for which the debt of the United States was now attached to. Okay? That debt, we basically went into what's known as an international bankruptcy at that point. Since we didn't pay the debt, the national government went to the UK, the King of England, and said, "Will you buy this debt?" The King of England said, "Sure, we'll back your debt, we'll pay your creditors." And in exchange, they took legal title over the national government's property. Okay, so since 1789, in 1789, the national government lost its sovereignty. So we were a republic for 7 years. 1782 to 1789, yeah.
But does that only count for Washington, D.C. and federally owned territories as opposed to the sovereign states?
At the time it did. We'll get into the sovereign states dishonor and bankruptcy.
That's why it's District of Columbia.
Yep.
Columbia is the king of the ocean, et cetera, all the songs that come out of England. So that's
yep.
the question. So the territory, the federal national government, which is Washington, D.C., post office, military bases, things like that?
Yes.
Okay, right.
Okay. So the term for an international bankruptcy is 70 years. Okay. So 70 years after 1789, we get into the year 1859. Does anyone know what happened in 1859?
Civil War.
Civil War. Okay. The reason for the Civil War, the real reason. Okay. Slavery was already on its way out. For those of you who know know international treaty and what was going on around the world at the time, it had already been outlawed internationally. So basically, America was in the process of following suit. But it was, at the end of the bankruptcy, the debt is due. Okay? And the states signed on as sureties on the Constitution saying they would pay the debt. Okay? So King of England, through his bankers and Rothschild's Bank of France, basically said, okay, debt's due. You states said you'd be surety. We want our money. And the southern states, or the northern states, went to the southern states and said, basically, you guys have all the money. You have all the gold. You have all the cotton. You have all the resources. You have all the wealth. The material wealth of our nation was pretty much wrapped up in the South. And the South said, yeah, no, we're not going to pay the debt. We're going to start our own country. And because of their dishonor with the international bankers, it was now up to the North it was the will of the creditors to get the debt paid or to take sureties for the debt. So, basically, we fight a war, end of the war. What gets resolved is now the states have lost their sovereignty because the states, refusing to pay their debt to the creditors, started another 70-year process, another bankruptcy. Okay, we didn't pay our old bankruptcy, so now we're going into another bankruptcy, except this time they're going to take away something else. The first bankruptcy, they took away the nation's sovereignty. They took that away because of how? Because the national government no longer could control its property. Whoever holds legal title controls the property. Okay, but now the states were in dishonor. So the international creditors were now taking control of the state's property. Okay? So the states no longer have their sovereignty because they don't control their property. That's the only thing that distinguishes a sovereign from someone who is not a sovereign. If you're a debtor, you're not sovereign. Creditor controls. Okay?
Sorry, did you skip over 1812 and 1811 on purpose?
I could talk about 1812, but it wasn't. Right now I'm doing the bankruptcy cycles. We'll talk about that. That's a good one too because of the War of 1812.
Well, it was just the way it was explained to me and how you explained it was that was kind of the foundation of the next thing that was going to happen.
Well, the War of 1812 was, okay, remember we had the Constitution in 1789.
Right.
And in 1791, Alexander Hamilton created the Bank of the United States. Bank of the United States is where the securities were being held. So basically the international creditors, wanting a guarantee of payment, said, okay, you hold your securities in this Bank of the United States, and we're all good. Okay? The Bank of the United States had a 20-year charter. So fast forward 20 years, 1811, and Congress decided, no, we're not going to renew the Bank of the United States. We're going to get rid of it. Okay, it wasn't a real popular thing anyways. Again, pissed off the creditors. Creditors basically, at that point, said, no, you don't, and they sent their troops in. So we had British troops on American soil, and they burned the White House and took possession of all the federal courts. Now, why would they take possession of the federal courts? That's where the titles are. They're taking control of the titles. Okay, as long as they control the property, that's all they care about. So after they burned the White House and took control of the property, we decided we'd renew the Bank of the United States, and they left. Okay, so 1859, second bankruptcy, states lose their sovereignty. Fast forward 70 years, 1929. What happened in 1929? Stock market crashed. Okay, what happened in 1929? The debt became due. Actually, let's go back 20 years before that, because they were already in preparation. Has anyone ever heard of the Federal Reserve Amendment and the Income Tax Amendment and Jekyll Island? Okay. In Jekyll Island, the international bankers, along with the Secretary of Treasury, got together in 1909 and said, okay, how are we going to handle this? In 20 years, this debt is due, and we don't have the money to pay it. So, what are we going to do? And they came up with the Federal Reserve System. Okay? And the Federal Reserve System and the tax collectors. Does anyone know like the stories of, let me think, actually, let's go back to the Bible. In the Bible, who were the tax collectors for Rome? Were they the Romans? Or were they the people of the territory that they had taken control of? The people of the territories, right. Now, so the tax collectors, even though they're working for a foreign power, they are your people. You don't send in foreign tax collectors. Okay? So the IRS, even though it's made up of U.S. citizens, is working for a foreign power. Okay? What do taxes go to? What does your income tax pay?
Interest on the debt. Interest on the national debt.
Does it pay for the operations of government? No, it does not pay for the operations of government. It's going to the creditors. Creditors get the tax. Okay? So 1929 rolls around and bankruptcy's due, and we don't pay. We go into another dishonor. This time...
How much money are we talking about? I mean, like I said, look, your monthly payment is $755 billion worth.
The first, I believe the first bankruptcy, 1789, it was around 13 million. Back then, which probably was a lot more than 13 million now. The creditors got their payment. The creditors for the Revolutionary War got paid by the Rothschild Bank of France, okay, Bank of Paris. So Rothschild paid the creditors, but now Rothschild had a security interest in the national government, okay? So that's basically what went down then. I don't know the amount and what it was up to the Civil War.
It's the buy-in to the Federal Reserve System was $500 million at that time.
Okay, so that's in 1913.
Because the discussion has been now, which has been brought up by Ron Paul, when the bankruptcy occurred the last time, there were people seriously on the inside saying we could buy out of the Federal Reserve System for the same $500 million. And there's a serious discussion going on behind the scenes as to whether or not that would happen. If that was to happen, every international bank would collapse and cause world chaos.
Yeah, and we don't want that.
So people behind the scenes said, we're not going to do it right now, but there's serious talk about them maybe doing it. So.
Yeah, you won't see the Federal Reserve System go anywhere unless it changes its name. That's all that'll happen. It's not going anywhere. It's the only way the creditors have a security.